Hi everybody. My name is Sam. I'm the executive director of the Vinci Art Alliance. For anyone who has never been here before or hasn't been here in a long time, we are the largest art collective in Philadelphia. We have about 300 artists that we work with throughout the year. We also run about 100 free, I'm used to saying free, we lost a lot of our funding this year, low cost workshops and programs, unless we get a grant and then they're free again. Yeah, we work with all of our artists who are on view. Every month our exhibitions change, and then we work with them to create all of the workshops, most of the workshops and programs that we do. We also work with organizations like South Street Hen House District to do a lot of their festival programming, bringing artists into that space. We have satellite locations in Center City as well at Culture Works and Atria. And we work with professional people like Adryan and Nicole to do workshops like this around basically all the ins and outs within creative practices outside of just making your work. So thank you for coming. And here are Adryan and Nicole. Yay!
Hello, thanks for coming.
Yeah, let's just get right into it. All right, well, I guess a little bit of background first, a little intro for anyone who doesn't know me already. I'm Nicole Tremaglio. I am based in Brooklyn. It's my first time in Philly, so I'm very excited to be here. So thank you, Vinci, for having us. I'm a writer, I'm a performer, and my creative practice explores how technology and media impact identity and pop culture. I write a pop culture newsletter called Nostalgia. It is on Substack. And yeah, Substack and YouTube were how me and Adryan met, because we were the only people talking about Xanga. Everyone else had forgotten, and we remembered. So yeah, that's how we connected, and we're excited to be here with you guys. Thank you for coming.
Yeah, I'll do a short intro. I'm Adryan Corcione, use they, them pronouns. I'm a journalist, essayist, writer, and yeah, a lot of my online work started through journalism, so writing for publications like Teen Vogue, Esquire, Playboy, Vice, and the past 5 years I've worked in technology. So my Substack, Adryan Online, is very much about internet culture and technology, personal essays of then and now. That's how Nicole and I met. I've been on Nicole's podcast since, and we have become friends through our Substacks. And yeah, it kind of like ties into the theme that we have today, is that I'm very passionate as somebody who does work in technology. Having a newsletter and kind of like that direct email way of communicating to people is so important, especially amidst for-profit algorithms that our work as creative can not only be lost in the algorithm, but also being trained to use for-profit AI language learning models. So thank you all for being here, and hopefully we're going to give you some tools if you want an alternative to social media as a way to get the word about your work out there.
Definitely. So why start a newsletter? Why have one? We're both big proponents of taking ownership over your work. I don't mean that in a Web3 coded way, in that there needs to be kind of like a log of your ownership over something. It's more so in terms of feeling a personal connection to your creative practice. And like Adryan just mentioned, when everything around us is for profit, it's like, okay, that can at times feel at odds with kind of the ethos that we have as creative people. And we want to focus on our art and how that enriches our lives and connects us to other other people, and so starting a newsletter can be a way to draw a direct line of connection between you and the people you care about and the people who care about your work as well. Yeah, adding a little bit more onto that too, it's tricky with the algorithms when certain behaviors online are rewarded, but when you have this direct connection, for example, mentioning like an open rate as a metric, you might have more people open your email directly than the people who would like your Instagram post, for example, and that the latter is completely out of your control. And so being able to identify an audience of people that you can remain in touch with in a way that's more in your own terms, that's kind of where that sense of ownership comes in. Where you don't want to rely on an algorithm alone to market your work. Because I think everybody can relate in this room that in practice is unreliable and unsustainable.
And also having to compete for attention through the algorithm and having to like, you know, perform for it in a way that it makes you, you know, it's kind of contrary to the art in the first place to try to get people to notice it, right? Through the algorithm, yeah.
Well, it's like, at what point does seeking attention detract from your creative practice?
Right.
If anything, you want your, I guess, marketing techniques or promotional techniques to support your creative practice.
Right.
Not become something that's draining upon your well of creativity, because then the quality of your work is gonna decrease. Because
Right.
it's so stressful to keep up with all of it.
Yeah, because it's like a whole business of running a social media account anyway. You don't want to be focused on like the business of having the account, right? Because like with newsletter marketing, it's more so of an offering. It's like, okay, here's my thing, here's your email, you can see it, you can leave it, as opposed to with the algorithm, you know, censoring certain words, certain political topics, right? I was just like, I don't know the last time people have saw anything on my timeline on Facebook because it doesn't get any traction. And you know, as a writer, I'm like, oh, do people not care about that? Which is not true at all, right? And because with a newsletter, you have your own metrics. How I like to visualize it is like every person who has signed up has kind of RSVP'd to my party, and everyone who opens the newsletter has like come in through the party, and like that's how I like to visualize it, because when you're kind of like a creative at home creating things on the internet, it can be a very solitary experience, but I've found through something like a newsletter, I'm like, okay, the people are actually seeing this, right? It feels like tangible in a way, as opposed to posting feels so passive.
Yeah, and having a newsletter, I'm gonna mention Substack because that's where our newsletters happen to live. Mine has not always lived on there. It may not always live on there, who knows? But now there's been a new wave. Substack has gotten more funding, more celebrities are coming to the platform. It's its own social media platform. And sometimes I'll see influencers on Instagram say, hey guys, should I start a Substack? If so, what should I write about? What do you want to hear about? And I think if you're asking that, the answer is no, you should absolutely not start one. The idea here, we're coming from kind of the other perspective where you are a creative person, you have a practice, whatever medium you work in, that's up to you. But the idea is that you already have something to say, you already have work that you want to support, and marketing is a way that you're able to connect your work with the people who need to see it, or the people that you want to be a part of your world. Not like, oh, let's just start a newsletter because everybody's doing it and maybe I can make money off of it the way that I made money off of Instagram or TikTok or whatever.
Yeah. it reminds people to, because we're both writers, so it's pretty easy for, like, more natural for us, I will say, to have something text-based. But that's not the only way that you could do a newsletter, or even like a Substack, right? Because I think it really reminds people of what you're up to, right? Because sometimes when you're artist, cultural worker, you are constantly thinking about your art. You're constantly engaged with it. You're constantly writing, or whatever your craft is. So a newsletter is one way to, like, even if you don't have a finished product, it's like, hey, I'm still here. I'm doing my thing. And kind of sharing the process with people, because I think, you know, if people want to see your work, people care about it, to open an email about it. They're definitely curious about your process, even if there's not, you know, a finished painting or something like that. And it definitely, like, boosts your credibility in a way where it's like, you know, I feel with like a grid post, it can be like kind of a big deal to like post on the grid. As opposed to like a newsletter, it's like, hey, this is like, some people treat it as more like a diary. Other people can see it as like a work in progress, a gallery kind of thing. So it really can be whatever you make of it. It can be fun, and it can be a lot more fun than social media.
On social media, it is about the destination, not the journey.
Yeah.
And if you see an incomplete product on TikTok, it's only because they're saying, watch part 2 for the finished product, so that you watch another video. The whole point of even showing a behind the scenes is to showcase a completed product, and it puts the pressure on completion and on a particular level of excellence, when that's not always the point of having a creative practice. And yeah, I guess it's the journey, not the destination, is the best way to sum it up.
Absolutely. Yeah, we've talked about, we are both on Substack. That's just what, at the time when I started, that was the medium to pick it up. And there are other alternatives, like Beehive, Ghost. I mean, like, over the years, I've had different newsletters even before my Substack. Do you remember Tiny Letter?
Mm-hmm.
That was my first one in like 2015. I had a newsletter called Rejected Pitches, which is kind of speaks for itself. In more of my journalism days, where I would write something around a pitch that I couldn't get placed. Even when I did a MailChimp when I was like studying abroad in college, and I treated it as like a diary, because I felt it was like, well, it wasn't just, I didn't just want to share it on social media, but like my dad wanted updates, so that was like the way to give them to him. So that was fun. So it really could be like anything that you make it. I will say that Substack, if you do intend to monetize, Substack will take 10%, which is pretty hefty compared to, I think it's like 3% is, you know, pretty typical for other kinds of platforms. But there's plenty of information out there. And also, like, you know, coming from people who are on Substack, who are also on other social media platforms, it's less about there's no right, correct platform. It's just like whatever is most accessible to you, that you can kind of start up and get it going, because that's like really what it's about.
Yeah, I started on MailChimp, and then I thought the templates were so ugly that I had to
Kind of technical too in the beginning, yeah.
I'm like, I need to vibe code this, and so I switched to Flowdesk. This was when my newsletters were still private, and then I actually started doing contract projects, designing people's emails specifically in Flowdesk. I did one in ConvertKit, and I'm like, never again, I am not touching this email editor. But yeah, not just in terms of aesthetics, you know, deciding where you want to be, where your, especially if your newsletter is related to your creative or your artistic practice, not solely from an aesthetic perspective of how do I want my newsletter to look when it lands in people's email inboxes, but also, yeah, what is most accessible for me in that it feels good to use. I feel like this is it's like going to check your own mailbox.
Right.
You know, it's right at the end of your driveway. It's not too much of an inconvenience. And if you say, yes, I'm gonna start a newsletter, and you feel kind of like a mismatch with your platform, it's not gonna be enjoyable to write it. You want it to be somewhere you feel like you can go and create. I feel like saying be consistent is like 101 of anything that you do, any kind of habit that you wanna create, but it starts with knowing yourself and having your goals for your newsletter be aligned with the goals of what your creative practice is. And like Adryan mentioned before, your newsletter doesn't have to just be text. It can be sharing images. It can be a combination of both. And so doing a little research on the platforms, playing around a little bit, you can be like, okay, how do I want to show up and where do I want to show up? And the platform is just one part of that kind of holistic experience. Yes. Now, okay, how to actually start the newsletter. Yeah, do you want to talk about editorial planning?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so pick a platform. Once you do that, you know, in my day job in marketing, editorial planning is the crux of it. And I do a bit of editorial planning for my Substack, but it's essentially like, how often do you want to publish? You could pick a publishing schedule. So if you want to publish once a month, once a week, or you could have a goal as just like, I just come to this whenever, you know, whenever I can, right? That's its own goal, especially if you're starting out. But if you are somebody who wants to get in kind of like a bigger, maybe you want to build your brand, maybe you do want to see it as like a more authentic marketing platform, then I would suggest going on some kind of publishing cadence where you're doing a week or a month, whatever makes sense. If you're really trying to make it on Substack, they tell you publish once or twice a week, and I have tried doing that. I mean, you publish weekly, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a lot of newsletters.
Yeah.
Yeah, when it comes to your publishing schedule, it's to set a cadence so that you can develop a consistent practice. It's not so that you can have rigidity or rules or some kind of formality that you're just doing performatively to seemingly legitimize your creative practice. Your creative practice is already legitimate no matter what it is. So the idea of having your schedule is that you want to stick to it so that you can continue uncovering like these deeper parts of and getting more closely in touch with your creative practice. But the planning should not take precedence. Right, the planning is to support you, not so that you can like plan it, overthink it, whatever, instead of actually doing it. Like the planning should not come at, I'm saying this to myself also, but the planning should not come at the cost of the execution.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and having some flexibility with your editorial planning, right? So like, Nicole and I are writers, but I noticed in this particular season of my life, it was kind of difficult to even publish 2 pieces of writing a month. So I transitioned to doing voice notes for my paid subscribers. So I'll just like talk instead of writing a thing, which surprisingly, you can, at least for me, I talk for what feels like a few minutes and then it's already a half hour. So that's what works for me. And also it's something that is a bit different from the writing, so it is fun for me, but also it's like, it kind of helps get some movement on it so that, I treat the personal deadlines as like, oh, I'm already looking forward to doing this thing. It's a matter of just like fitting it in to my schedule, and that's where, that structure is like supportive of a creative habit, which is very important.
Right, it's like any habit where it's weird when you don't do it. I think of when I started violin in 3rd grade and I never wanted to practice, and it's like, well, you're not gonna get any better if you don't ever practice. And then I did the clarinet the next year and I was practicing all the time because it was just fun, and fun is always my main objective in everything that I do. But right, if you don't have any kind of structure around it, like
Yeah.
structure should not be a prison, but at the same time, it is a practice that you cultivate. Oh, I wanted to mention too, when actually starting it, I mentioned this a little bit before, where it can be kind of uncomfortable when everything around us just exists to make money, and your creative practice exists because it's like your life force, essentially. I was gonna say not to be dramatic, but yes, to be dramatic. And it's a little bit uncomfortable sometimes positioning your creative practice in relation to capitalism, but at the same time, that's just kind of the reality of the situation. I mentioned this earlier, where it's like, okay, the circle of what I am good at and what I enjoy doing is luckily a circle, but then where you make money is this other distant circle, and okay, in order to live and survive, those circles need to migrate a little bit closer together. And a newsletter may or may not be a part of your grander ecosystem of how you support your creative practice, if your creative practice is your business.
You want to mention the note you had about running out of ideas?
Oh my gosh. Okay, yeah. I've never run out of ideas. I'm not gonna lie. Like, I always have something to say. I really do think that, like, people worry about, oh, what do I write about? What if I don't have anything to say? And it's like, no, everybody has something to say. I do feel like, again, when you practice, you're more likely to maintain momentum. Like, if you didn't practice the violin for 2 weeks, then maybe it doesn't sound so good when you pick it up. But if you're kind of in the routine, you're like, okay, this comes a little bit easier to me. I don't like to write from the perspective of being annoyed about something, but pay attention. Like, the things that you love, the things that annoy you, whether positive or negative, they're things that are making you feel something. And anything that makes you feel something is something that you can draw from. Anything, if you're more of a thinker than a feeler, I'm more of a feeler than a thinker, but if you're more of a thinker and you're more of up here, the more you can kind of pull out of here and channel that into your work too. Not that all newsletters, I think a lot of newsletter writing now is more of in the vein of memoir and like personal exposition, and if that's not your creative practice,
Don't worry about it.
Don't worry about it. You don't have to go there, but whatever you're thinking, whatever you're feeling, you don't necessarily have to write about that exact thing, but just pay attention to that stuff, because all of the stuff that's kind of swirling around is gonna contribute to your creative well that you draw from for inspiration. Like, it's not gonna, you're not gonna see something on the street necessarily and say, I wanna write about that, but it's gonna make you feel something, or you're gonna be reminded of something, and then you'll write about something else. but it was inspired by something totally random or unexpected.
Yeah. I think it's funny. I also feel like I don't have much to say until I start like getting comfortable on a topic. Like it's in my
Yeah.
head. Yeah, like I really truly believe, like sometimes I'm like, for somebody who is opinionated, I think, as many of my friends would say, I'm just like, I got nothing to say about this. But because I have the structure of like sitting at a desk, returning to something, I'd be like, okay, here's like, you know, it's easy for me to get it going because I have that structure. Because if I didn't have that structure, I'd be like, I got nothing. I really don't have anything to say, which is kind of crazy.
Yeah, how you're saying playing with the format.
Yeah,
Right, press record on
and just
the
go.
voice note, and then if the first 30 seconds is kind of nonsense, you tend to, while you're already speaking, hit your stride. Or something I'll do is pretend that somebody asked me about something, pretend I'm being interviewed about this question, as opposed to just thinking of it from my own perspective. How would I explain my take on something like this to someone else? And then that's when it tends
Right.
to kind of flow out.
Yeah, and I think perhaps the true intention of social media, emphasis on social, is optimizing your newsletter for connections. So like, you know, when you get access to metrics, it is helpful to have that information. And perhaps you could be like, oh, well, maybe you learn things about your audience, they're more interested in this topic than the other topic. But I also want to give people personal liberty to just like not look at it. Personally, I don't really pay attention to much of my metrics anymore, aside from knowing that my newsletter did reach people and people did open it functionally. Because like there was a time in my Substack I'm like, oh, well, people are more interested in Britney Spears than whatever other topic, and I was like, so I guess I should write about Britney Spears more. And then it's like, okay, like that's not what this, you know, that's not what this is about. So I think in that regard, optimizing it for connection is a good way so that you can like, you know, try to really reach people and build relationships. Because that kind of is, you know, in theory, it's like what social media is supposed to be, and you know, you do connect with people, but in a less artificial way, it's kind of more of an offering to like let people know what you're working on, and they're like, oh, like, you know, your painting's gonna be here in Philly. Oh, I live in Philly, you know, and like that, just kind of creating conversation around your work, I think is a great way to get people authentically engaged with it. And just there's just like so many opportunities. And yeah, it was a podcast episode about Xanga where I found your Substack, and I think I was just like, hey, do you want to talk?
Yeah.
And you were like, yeah, sure.
Yeah. And we did. And then when we were going to be in the same place physically,
yes.
we're like, want to meet? Sure.
I had no idea that you were even in the Northeast.
See, like the magic of the internet. And listen, if we were going to talk to you about newsletter optimization or how to get more followers or how to blow up on Substack, like that's a different workshop, and I would not be leading it. Here, the main takeaway is exactly what Adryan said, which is optimizing for connection. And so I personally, I mean, there are a lot of people who are fulfilled, at least in a superficial manner, of when they see the graph going up and to the right, that feels good to them. I feel good when I go to a coffee shop and our waiter looks like Jacob Elordi, and true story.
Yes.
So and just being able to make friends and find the joy in your creative practice and meet other people who experience that same kind of joy, and the fact that we do it in a similar manner, that's what I feel like really matters over everything else. Like there's so much noise and there's so much kind of struggle, and I think a lot of us have been on the internet for a really long time now and we're really tired, and so there's been kind of at least we're in the early stages of kind of a macro shift back toward in-person spaces and gatherings and meeting people, knowing people, fostering relationships, being engaged in your local community. I personally value those things, and so even just to be having this space right now where we're all committing to that as something that we value, that's really important.
Yeah. Yeah, and I do think that with the rise of Gen AI, it's making social media less fun to be on.
It's just media.
Right. Yes.
It's not social.
Right. It's an entertainment platform now. That's how it's being marketed as. And optimizing for connection for other humans is really, really valuable, and I think people are going to see that. So once you do start a newsletter, don't be afraid to tell everyone you know, to sign up for it, to talk about it, because that's like how you start building your following, building it in this alternative way. And it's going to be, assuming people check email, which I know that's a whole other thing. I have some friends who don't check email, but I do believe that it is a more direct way to reach people in that regard.
Sometimes people will be like, oh, did you hear about this thing? I'm like, did you hear about my newsletter where I wrote about that last week? And you do kind of have to remind people sometimes, and in a world where a lot of people do have their own personal brands, and the fraction of someone's attention that you may hold at any given moment is usually pretty small,
Yeah.
it can seem overwhelming. It does feel nice to, with a newsletter, rebuild kind of a cozy little corner for yourself, and then that way you are not competing with all of this noise. I know that there are certain people who don't have social media, that my newsletter is their media essentially, or how they know what's going on with me, or how they find out anything about pop culture, entertainment, while I'm not reporting on news or anything. Yeah, it's still just a way where people, you just feel like a little bit more intentional about the kind of, I don't even want to say demands you're making on other people's attention, but it's like, if anything, it's a respite from a constant scroll.
Yeah. We're gonna talk a little bit about the world building. Personal branding.
Definitely, again, in a world where everyone is and has a personal brand, it's like your newsletter, I think a lot of people are like, oh, I don't want to bother people essentially by like promoting myself or telling them about my newsletter. Are they going to think I'm annoying? Or they think am I mentioning it too much? Am I talking about it too much? And it's like, well, you're doing yourself a disservice if you're not a fan of and a primary proponent of your own work. You want to have confidence in your work to the extent where you are proud of it and you want to share it with other people. And people who care about you, not saying that's going to be everybody, no offense, but the people who do care about your work want to hear about it. And you can probably think of tons of cases where you're like, wow, that other artist is doing something so interesting, or wow, that writer's doing something really engaging. And people who are creative tend to have this insatiable curiosity about things, and that is what makes us creative, is that we want to explore those things. And so you staying true to your own work and you backing your own work is just showing everyone that, like, here, I value my own work and I want to share it with you. And sometimes I feel this, like, I don't want to market myself because I'm not making it for money necessarily, or I'm not making it for any kind of social status or anything like that. Of course, on social media, all of those things are all kind of inextricably tied at this point. So no creative act is completely isolated from those factors. But with a consistent newsletter practice too, or even my website's a part of this too. You go to it, you know exactly what you're in for. You know the deal. And then I can go to Kaylee's website and immediately go, oh, that's somebody that I would really get along with. That's someone I would work well with. And it's because, for better or for worse, on the internet, and also in person, how one presents, you are giving people on the outside an impression of what's important to you. And so a newsletter, that's one of the primary modes through which I show people who are either already kind of in my orbit, or if they have just discovered me, okay, what is it about this person? And it's a little bit more than an elevator pitch. It's something, world building's a little bit more abstract, and it's like across all the different platforms where you exist, what's kind of the unifying factor? What's the vibe that you give people? And they say a picture is worth 1,000 words, but I think on Substack, 1,000 words are 1,000 words.
Right.
And so, however you want, whatever that world is comprised of, yeah, for a lot of people it tends to be Instagram, but I feel a little bit limited by the figurative and literal boxes that you're putting on social media. And so the idea of world building is, okay, how am I going to present and represent myself and my creative practice beyond the confines of that tiny square?
Yeah. Do you want to tell them about your Advent calendar?
Oh my God. Okay, so it is the holiday season once again, and I took a course this summer at the School for Poetic Computation called HTT Poetics. The idea was to play with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript to create websites that are more like poetry than tech. And so I was having a lot of fun with that. I say I have a honorary degree from MySpace University because I've been doing some coding since those days. And so I said, okay, I want to do something fun. What is I want to make a website. It's gonna feel like it's in my world. And I definitely have a nostalgia bend to my work. And so I made an advent calendar. There's 24 doors, and every day when you click, every day unlocks a new door. And behind all the doors are a pop culture moment from that particular day in December 2005. So all kind of memories, and it's like, oh, this was Hilary Duff and Carmen Electra at the Cheaper by the Dozen 2 premiere. Things like that. And I find so much joy in the niche, the offbeat, the obscure, the eccentric, and the absurd. And so if I was thinking about kind of what fits into my world, those are kind of my adjectives, where it's a little bit, it's something that is universally recognizable, but you're like, okay, it's kind of like, that's a little random, but it's funny. Yeah, the visual aesthetic unifies the world, but then also it's just like whatever comes out of your brain is the thing. I would always try to compartmentalize, right? Because in life, I've at least felt like it's been forced upon me. Like, this is your job. This is your job title. This is your extracurricular activity. This is blah, blah, blah. And it's like, you don't have to label yourself so much. Whatever, like, you are the unifying thing. You don't have to make all of your artistic projects or pursuits make sense to anybody because they're all in your world. Thank you, that was a fun project. It's still going strong. Let's see what today's is. I'll pull it up really quick. Today is December,
12?
what?
13.
Today is December 13th. Okay. Oh, today is December 13th, 2005. Hillary Duff and Carmen Electra during the Los Angeles premiere at Man Village Theater in Westwood, California. And there's a picture of Hillary Duff, Carmen Electra, and Santa.
There you go.
And I feel like when it comes to world building, it's like, there are so many things where you can look at other people and be like, yeah, there's overlap, but there are certain things that just can only come out of your brain, and I think this is one of them.
Totally. I think that's pretty much our spiels. If you wanted to open up for questions, if anybody has any questions for us.
Questions, comments, no complaints. Yes?
I would love to ask you guys, like, kind of how, like, about your weekly routines or whatever your routine is to be consistent. I'm interested to hear more about your creative process. Like, you shared about, like, how the ideas come, but how long does it take you to write? Like, do you have moments where you're, like, keep redoing things? Or at least I have moments where I'm, like, I really go into detail or try to keep redoing things before I post, and I've been very mindful of that lately, so I'm curious to hear more from you guys about what that practice, what that routine looks like.
You wanna go first? You're on a weekly schedule.
I made the mistake once of trying to go back to fix something because I had already drafted it and they're like, no, I want to tweak it again. And unless you unschedule it in Substack, it will send your draft. Like if you already have it scheduled, and even if you start tweaking it again, it will send it at that time. So it did. And like half of a sentence was missing. And I'm like, that's what I get for trying to go back and nitpick. I think that I don't know, I don't primarily identify as a painter, but I've heard that painters will sometimes be like, yeah, that's when it feels complete.
Knowing when to stop, yeah.
Yeah, and it's like, you could paint like a million strokes over and over again and it can never be done, but a painter will be like, yep, it's done. You have to be like that with a newsletter too, because I'm the kind of personality where I would go back a million times and tweak things and change things. And it's like, you don't have to do that to yourself. Also, that's gonna take up a lot of time and energy to fix something where it's like, it probably actually doesn't even need to be fixed. If you need to take an hour for yourself and be like, I just want like a free writing time. Or sometimes if I feel a little bit stuck, I will just, same thing as just doing a voice note, I will type out stuff and it will eventually start making sense. It does just have to be something that I'm looking forward to. I tend to be a bit of a procrastinator when it comes to writing. If my newsletter's coming out on Tuesday, I will write it on Monday. If I do it on Tuesday early morning, I will feel a little bit pressured, and I know that about myself. And so, again, we talked about this, once you choose your platform, it's like, what's your realistic editorial schedule? I tend to be, what do they call it? Johnson's law, where like the more time you have to do something, the longer it will take. That is me. If you say you have all day to write your newsletter, I will sit on my computer for 8 hours and write it. And just because I can. But is that always the most effective use of my time? No. I think that you know how much time you have in your week that you want to spend doing something. And there is such thing as too much time working on something. There are some ideas where I think, oh, that would be great to write about. But unless it feels like a lightning strike, then I just add it to my list of things. Like, if it's not time sensitive and it doesn't feel like a lightning strike, then I can write about it later. Whereas if something feels really urgent to me or really exciting, then I'll write about it. Like, that's kind of how I prioritize. Like, if you have a bunch of ideas and you're like, where do I start? I start with the ones that get me the most excited, and then if you start with one that you get excited about and you lose momentum, well, it's your newsletter. Bye-bye to that idea, and just pick another one. That's part of what I like about having my own newsletter, is that I don't have an editor, I don't have a boss to answer to, I don't have any particular parameters that are like hindering my creative process. And so again, the more that you're in practice with yourself, the faster you can make those calls.
Yeah.
And be like, yes, I want to do this. No, I don't want to do this. Okay, I have 2 hours. I can do it.
I think what's important too, because you mentioned you publish on Tuesdays, right? So for me, I publish on Thursdays, or my publication day is Thursday at 12 p.m.
Mm-hmm.
So you better believe on Wednesday night, I'm finalizing stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Because another thing too is like, I enjoy having a newsletter and I do want to get stuff out, and that is kind of the motivation to like get something out. Because I was like, oh, well, there's always next Thursday, and I was like, no, today, tomorrow, Thursday, it's happening. So there is some kind of like that self accountability and getting it out. And I think with writing, especially since I was a journalist, I am used to that rigor of just like, all right, get it out, move on. Kind of thing. So, but with the voice notes, they were interesting because I was like, it was so hard to not just like go back and listen to them and then try to re-record them. Where I even like sent them to like a couple friends, and I'm like, is this like worth anything? And then surprisingly, they were like, oh yeah, I found this really interesting. Like, it felt like you were talking to me, right? And that's kind of the point, right? So, the voice notes especially are you know. They aren't meant to be polished, right? Because like, I think when I first was on Substack, I was treating every essay like a polished draft that was ready for publication. I was like, this is too much. This is too much rigor for something that's meant to be fun, right? And to kind of play around with.
Yeah, I mean, when I was doing the podcast, I had that come out on Tuesday and the newsletter come out on Thursday. And so I had the newsletter come out on Thursday for years, and then I found my editorial standards start to slip, and I was like, okay, I always want to have it scheduled for Thursday morning. Then I wouldn't schedule it. I would still be writing it on Thursday.
Right.
Then it would go out at night, or then it would go out Friday morning. Then one day when it went out on a Saturday, I was like, okay, let's be really honest with myself here about what I want to do. And I was just thinking that, right, it's like when you have a newsletter, that's not necessarily the only thing going on in your creative practice, let alone your life. And so I was just at a point where I'm like, okay, it's not feeling good for me to write on Thursdays anymore, because I end up pushing everything to the back half of the week, and I want this to be fun and exploratory, not like a task or a chore. The second anything starts feeling like that, I want out. So I changed, I said, oh, that's why I did the podcast on Tuesday, because I like putting out stuff earlier in the week. And so I shifted it, and now I'm like, okay, this is what's working. And again, since it's your publication, you can do whatever you want, which I love.
What's the voice? I love that. Thank you. Just wanted to ask a clarifying question. When you say voice note, is that like Substack podcast, or is it just something you embed in your newsletter through Substack, like an audio file?
Great question. So it is a literal voice note on my phone that I do upload as a podcast to Substack.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah.
Thank you. That was great. Thank you guys.
Yeah, thank you for your question.
Thanks so much for this presentation. I have kind of a tactical question, which is, I find it really hard to edit my own writing, and I don't mean like reading my own writing, I mean like I kind of can't see the typos in my own writing, so I'm curious how you all edit yourselves.
Great question. People do catch typos in my writing, and then I thank them for reading. So my readers are my editors for that one.
I love reading writing tends to sound how I speak. And so if I'm reading something back, and I don't mean reading it a million times, if I read it once or even a couple times, if I'm reading something and the writing doesn't sound like something that would organically come out of my mouth, I have to change it. It doesn't sound like it's me, it doesn't sound natural, and sometimes my sentences can be, well, I speak in run-on sentences, so I write in run-on sentences a lot. And so, right, there's a difference between, oh, this is perfectly grammatically correct. I tend to be on top of my spelling game, but if something's not perfectly grammatically correct, or if I'm interjecting a bunch of thoughts, that is just how my brain works. And so I also think that people tend to read things as they get familiarized with you and your voice and your world. When I read people's newsletters that I know, I read it in their voice in my head, not my own voice. And so if it sounds like you get to set the tone, and I think that the tone imbues the words with meaning. So it's not simply just, oh, these are the words, and oh, that word was not the right word. It's like, no, does it sound like you? Does it ultimately feel like you when you put it out? That's kind of more of like the gauge that I use, rather than an external. This is also me never having had an editor before. Therefore, yeah, I don't feel that sense of accountability.
You could also, oh, sorry. go on.
Yeah, toward like a particular, established standard.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
I would also, what I used to do, I don't do it much anymore, mostly just because of how fast things go, but just like printing it out and then looking at it that way. If I was doing like I did that with, I'm applying to grad school this fall, so I wrote like a whole 6,000 word paper on my own, so to prepare for school. So for something like that, I have printed it out many drafts and edited it that way to get some kind of distance. And also to help, especially earlier in your practice, if you are trying to be more confident in your writing, sleeping on something. So like writing it one day, writing a draft one day, sleeping on it, and then having like a fresh level-headed. Because when you're staring at the same draft, trying to get it done, it can guarantee that it'll be not as good. So those are things I've done in the past.
Knowing when to be done.
Yeah. And just be done with it.
Yeah, actually, I was gonna say I'm like, wait, I have had an editor. It was for when I have written for various magazines, like an indie literary magazine, and I remember writing a piece, and I stayed up so late, which I don't like doing. I like sleeping more than I like writing, and so I love writing, but I love sleeping even more. So I had written this first draft, and then I sent it in delirious, and I did not sleep on it. I hit send, then I went to sleep, and then I woke up and I was like, what have I done? So then I opened back up the draft, which I did not have to do, but I read it and I was like, wait, that was good.
You'll be so convinced. You'll be like so convinced that like you're like, okay, this is the best thing I've ever done. And you wake up the next day and you're like, alright, it is.
Luckily for me, it was the other way around. I was like, I completely forgot what I wrote, and then I read it in the morning, and then that editor made wonderful suggestions and adjustments to my first. It was my first of like 3 drafts, and I said, wow, those were so helpful. This totally elevated my writing and took it to a place that I never would have been able to get to myself. And then Matthew was like, that's what an editor's job is. And I'm like, oh, okay, I didn't know that. So it's helpful sometimes that whether it's someone else or even your own fresh set of eyes.
Yes. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's it. Sometimes you are you in a different form.
A future version of yourself.
Definitely.
Anyone else have any questions? you, Jane, for yours.
Yep, thank
That's
you.
really awesome.
Cool.
I have one more question. So I know we talked about like creative practice and that being the main outcome and the value, right? But I'm curious if any of you do monetize your Substack or if anything like that has come up.
I think that I always, Substack being another social media platform, I've always had this internal struggle of I want to just do things as if it was a perfect world. It's not a perfect world, and so again, that has made me look inward and evaluate what I value about my creative practice, what I want to be for my own creative and artistic development and growth. But then, okay, yeah, we need to get a job. And so, and so I've definitely, even just meeting other people who have made their newsletters their job, and just kind of talking to them and seeing how, not if it's changed their writing practice, but how it's changed their writing practice. I mean, I think anybody who has, I mean, even generationally, there's a pressure of monetizing all of your hobbies and everything you ever do. You know, even if someone's like, oh wow, you're so good at sewing, you should start an Etsy store. It's like, no, I should not start an Etsy store. Yeah, you should just like make them in your apartment and then like shoot them out to people. No, absolutely not. And so there is this pressure that we kind of put on each other, and that's meant to be a compliment in that we all have this level, we're all striving for a level of excellence, that everything that we do is of a quality that can be professionalized. And that is a bit dangerous because it does change your relationship to what you are doing. So that being said, in 2026, my Substack is not my full-time job, but if it became one, would I be upset? No. And so I'm excited for what this upcoming year has in store, because I've done that work around like, okay, how will I have to adjust in order to allow myself to be discovered and seen? Sometimes it's scary, whether it's on social media or wherever, it's scary when you are noticed, or when you do get kind of, not recognition, but when you do see the, oh, you know, new paid subscriber, and you feel this sense of, oh, I can't let them down, or oh, I need to still produce something, or oh, I need to top myself. There can be the pressure you put on yourself.
Yeah, I do monetize mine, but it's more so like an offering. I do have paywall content, but it is more so things that I don't want to be Googleable, where like the first thing that people find, they're like, oh, let's find out what Adrian's life was like when they were reporting on the far right. Like, I don't want that to be like the first thing that people find. And I mean, if they want to like subscribe, be a paid subscriber and find that out, that's their prerogative. But yeah, it's more so like, I kind of want a little club almost for stuff, because like I've been writing on the internet since I was 18, writing for like, you know, blogs and other people's publications, that it felt important to me to be like, okay, like let's bring it back and have like a little some boundaries and have like a little club almost, because yeah, when I was coming of age as a writer, like right out of college, it was like, you know, they were asking people to write about like their deepest, darkest secrets for publications like XOJ. I mean, you still see it in the Cut today, right? Those kind of like viral headlines. So to me as like, I was in that world, so the paid subscribers is like, oh, okay, if you really like what you see, you can kind of like come into this like little VIP club. So it's less of like adding value to something, but it's more so like, you get a little bit more, right? It's like, if I had a book out, right, people are gonna pay to have that book, and they're gonna get like, you know, more of a glimpse than what they could just Google about me, and all the publications in that way. So it's fun in that way, especially because the Rambley Voice stands. I was like, these were on YouTube. I really just like want my employer finding these randomly, so not that there's anything incriminating, it's just rambly is all.
I think that when everyone is so used to commodifying themselves on the internet, you almost pay for, I don't know if intimacy is the right word, but you pay for kind of an intimate environment, and you pay to access someone's privacy in
Yeah.
a time when everyone's privacy feels exploited.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. Great question, thank you.
Thank you.
I have a question. Sorry if this was covered earlier, but I know when you're a creative online, there's a huge pressure to kind of niche-ify yourself. So as people with very diverse interests, is that something that you prioritize and kind of having like, this is my lens on this thing, or do you honor your diverse interests in a different way, and how would you thread that together to kind of serve that sort of like quote unquote requirement of people on the internet, or do you just kind of like disregard it in the name of creativity and also like, I am a diverse person who wants to show all of my interests and hobbies and things online? Like, how do you negotiate the two?
I used to feel like the former, and now I feel like the latter, how
Mhm.
you were describing it, where it's like, if you are a creative person, you trying to compartmentalize all of your interests is going to detract from your creativity, and you're going to be so focused on how you need to label yourself that you're not going to make anything worthwhile, or at least that was my experience. And so, of course, what did I do? Try to outsource the answer to a friend and be like, what should I do? Should I try to just be one thing? Should I niche down, blah, blah, blah. Everyone was like obsessed with niching down, whatever. And she was like, well, no, like it's your thing. Like if you said to me tomorrow, I'm up and joining the circus, I would be like, let's go. Like send globe, and there's a lot of like pixel art on there, and it says welcome to my world on it. And you think about a constellation, right? It's like you got the sun, or the solar system, you got the sun, Mercury, etc. And all of those planets don't look like each other. They don't depend on each other to function. And like that's kind of us too. It's like no one just woke up in a vacuum and has only had one experience. They're not just one thing only, and that can never evolve, change, grow, etc. Because I think as creative people, we actually crave that more than most, to learn and grow and evolve and be curious. And so try as I might to compartmentalize all my different selves, it only made me feel less in touch with any of those parts. And the less I try to make sense of it all, the things might not connect to each other in a really linear fashion, but like, since when do I care about being linear?
Yeah, and you are the niche, you know? So, like, when I first started my newsletter, I was like, I have no idea what I want to write about, but that was kind of like the play, right? And I started out as Adryan's POV, because I was just like, I don't know, I am the theme. And then I changed it to Adryan Online, because I did want to specify that like my work was contained to like online and tech culture. But even that, as somebody who has been writing on the internet for over a decade, I, again, never run out of ideas, so yeah, you are the niche.
I'm curious, how do you all think about privacy? Like we were talking about, like there's certain things I might write about that I don't want certain groups to find out about, and I don't necessarily want it linked back. Like, do you write about your friends? Do you write about your partners? Do you not? Do you write about your partner but make sure they can't get the paid subscription so they can like, or you know, whatever that thing is that might be.
I did unsign up my dad. My Substack. Yeah, I think it's like knowing as a writer, just so I have written a lot of personal essays online, and when I was younger, I was just so eager to have things published. I was like, oh, I'll write about anything, sex, dating, sure, whatever. And now since I've had a Substack, it was a good practice to be like, okay, like what do I want to write about here? So like for instance, I'm polyamorous. I don't write about that online. I don't really acknowledge it just because I'm like, I want that to be like a private part of myself, but it is very intentional to have started that, or to like have that practice, right? So yeah, I think just like being mindful, as like any writer who writes anything like more personal of having on there, it's like something that like I'm intentional about, and like it was very important for me when I had my own platform. So I was like, okay, I can have boundaries here, and doing justice in a way for my younger self, who was just really excited to write things, and wrote some very personal things that are on the internet somewhere in the ether. Yeah.
I mean, boundaries is the key word there. It's like you get to decide what you want to share, what you don't want to share, and so it's more about setting and holding boundaries than it is about self-censorship. If you really want to write about something personal, go ahead. But yeah, I always felt more judgment like on Instagram, especially with dance or like doing videos, and then, you know, people at work find it, or like your family finds it, and so whatever you put out there, you may or may not be judged by people you do know, people you don't know. Usually the people you do know are the worst critics, if you're not your own worst critic. And so you get to also decide if you want to listen. And if you say, I want to write about my personal life, I personally don't. I'll mention little anecdotes and things of that nature, but yeah, that's just where I've set it for myself, in that, okay, I don't write anything that I really wouldn't want anyone to read. But that can also change at any time too.
Cool.
Yeah, you get to decide. And if someone doesn't like what you wrote, then they can just read one of the 80 million other things on the internet instead.
Or you could have a secret Substack, which I cannot confirm or deny.
How does one hypothetically get a secret Substack?
I don't know, you have to ask for something like that.
Someone asked me recently about Instagram versus real life, and I was like, oh my god, I haven't heard someone say that for years.
Oh yeah.
Because if anything, now it feels more like Substack versus real life than Instagram versus real life. But again, it's like, there's always going to be shifting ideals online of how, quote, authentic we all need to perform, ironically. And so it's about, regardless of where it is, digitally, in person, on what platform, it's all about how you want to show up.
Absolutely. Thanks for your question.
Woo! Great.
Thanks everyone for
you.
coming. I don't know where to stand this, but make sure to support the Vinci Art Alliance too. Thanks for coming out, and
Yay!
yeah.
Oh yeah, our Substacks are on the papers.
Yeah.
So
And
good.
feel free to, if there's like an extra, you're definitely free to take an extra on the table, on the chairs. Yeah.
Thank you guys so much. Yay!
Yay.
This is nice paper. Sorry.
Right and wrong. I have a printer in.
I just got one this year for the first time since college.
Game changer?
I mean, it's nice. I mean, because I used to like scan art and stuff, and that's been so much more helpful than like photographing it myself. Yeah, it's been nice. Also, when your parents will order ink for you.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah.
Okay, I was looking.
I got it off of Facebook Marketplace. There's a ton on Facebook Marketplace.
Really?
I got it for like 10, 20 bucks maybe.
I was just looking up the Spice Girls Polaroid camera.
Oh, I got a Barbie one.
And the film is more expensive.
Oh, yeah, the
Like,
camera is
so
expensive.
Also, I wanted to say, do you remember Sky Sweetnam?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Yeah.
I do remember.
Yeah, I thought you, yeah,